On this week's Glanbia Ireland Dairy Focus Vodcast, we'll go through some tips and management practices to implement on farm in order to close up the platform properly for spring 2021. And we'll also hear from one of our business manager teams in the northeast region on how the maize crop has progressed in that region over the last days and weeks.
Over the next 6 weeks, we'll be running the virtual Vet Expo days across our entire Glanbia network. And to kick off the Vet Expo, we'll be having a Vet Demo Day on Instagram and Facebook on Thursday, October 15th. During this day, we'll be discussing how to use the bulk tank herd disease screening and other test results to make decisions around drying off and housing cattle. And we'll also be showing demonstrations of dosing and injecting cattle. There will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the day, so please join us on Thursday for the virtual Vet Demo Day.
When we look at average grass growth or grassland management at the moment, average grass growth rates have started to decline, and according to Pasture Base Ireland this week, average grass growth rates across the region are approximately 40 kilos of dry matter per hectare per day. With some slight variation in dry matter percentage also, we've seen this week in Moore Park in County Cork that average dry matter percentages after damp conditions were as low as 12.3%. But at the moment we're trying to maximise the amount of days we get at grass this back end. We want to keep grass in the cow's diet for as long as possible. And then we also don't want to compromise ourselves, and we want to set up the platform properly for spring 2021. Those two key figures we've spoken about over the last couple of weeks and months is that every extra additional day we get at grass this back end is worth €1.80 per cow per day. But of course not compromising the platform for next spring, because that figure of every additional day we get at grass next spring with the cows is worth €2.70 per livestock unit per day. So now is the time to start implementing the closing procedure and setting yourself up properly for the coming spring. The target, of course, at the moment being that we'll run a 60-40 planner where the target is to have 60% of the platform grazed before the 1st of November. And again, spring grazing rules apply where weather conditions have deteriorated. So we want to be using a 12-hour strip wire allocation, using a back fence to protect your regrowths, trying to achieve out those 4 centimetre residuals to have a clean sward for next spring, and also, optimising the paddocks during that wet period that have the greatest access around the platform. We also want to make sure at the moment that the cow's dry matter intake capacity is being met at all times, and this can be quite difficult where grass is running short, where average farm cover wasn't built to where it should be, or where dry matter percentages are quite low and cows are moving through grass rapidly. To ensure that a cow's dry matter intake is being met, we can increase our concentrate supplementation via the parlour, or we can reintroduce a buffer feed at the barrier. But again, we want to make sure that we're allocating grass that's available or area available on the platform, so we keep grass in the diet and we complement it then with either a buffer feed or adequate concentrate supplementation to make sure her intake capacity is being met and we're not seeing any declines in lactation persistency or volume output. Every extra day we decline the closing procedure or the autumn rotation planner will cost approximately 15 to 16 kilos of dry matter per hectare in regards to average farm cover next spring. So when we're talking about taking a quick example, if we take a 40 hectare farm that has started closing on the 5th of October and we compare that to a farm who won't start closing until the 15th of October, that's worth about 150 kilos of dry matter per hectare next spring in your average farm cover. But also it's worth an extra 5 days additional grass next spring per cow. And when we compare that to a silage-based diet, it's an additional 2,200 litres of output. So to optimise that output next spring, we have to start closing up the platform accordingly this back end. Now we'll hear from Northeast Business Manager Geoff Kennedy on how the maize crop has progressed over the last weeks and days in the Northeast region.
So Geoff Kennedy here on a field of Croft here just outside Newbridge, County Kildare. We're just assessing the crop ahead of harvest to see what stage of growth it's at and see whether it's fit to cut. You can see the field of croft here behind me is over 7 feet tall, but I suppose the height of the crop and how the crop looks visually from the road can be misleading from different varieties. So as I said, the kernel is the main deciding factor on when is the appropriate time to cut. So you can see this, I've just taken a cob off the crop here, and you can see with the milk line on the kernel is not quite at the half to 3/4 way up the kernel, so it's a little bit off just yet. We'd say a week to 10 days. Similarly, and probably most decidingly, is the fact that there's still moisture in the kernel. You can see there. Similarly, if I just take another cob here off the crop, you can see that there is still moisture in the kernel. So just to have a look there. So again, that's probably a more clear view. The milk line is not quite up at the 3/4 way up the kernel, so it's not quite at the fit stage yet. Similarly, if you taste the kernel, there's still moisture there. That should be a very dry, starchy taste off the kernel, so it's just not quite at that stage yet. The key here is just to keep an eye on the crop and assess it at this time of year. Assess it every couple of days, because with the frost, with the change of weather and frost and wind, the crop can come into ripeness quite quickly. So and as people know with contractors, 2 or 3 days notice is always key to ensure you cut it at the correct stage. So we're in another field not too far away from the previous field, still a field of croft, but we've noticed this crop is actually a bit closer to ripening. You see the sheath there, I've actually left some behind me there, but the sheath is turning more of a brown, and in this case sort of a purple colour, and it's drying out, it's desiccating a lot more, and that's a sign that the crop is near harvest. Similarly, when we open up the kernel and have a look at the milk line, you can see the milk line there is just approaching the half to 3/4 way up that kernel. Similarly, when pressing my thumb into the kernel, there is a lot less moisture there. It's a lot drier. And just to taste the kernel, then again, there's a lot drier. You can taste that starch inside in the kernel. So this crop is still probably under a week away, but again, this particular farmer will have to keep a close eye, because over the course of 2 to 3 days, if he does get a night's frost, that starch content can increase quite rapidly, and it can approach harvest in a much shorter time frame. Okay, so just if we take a look at the sheath again, you can see the sheath is starting to change colour from the green to in this case, more of a purple brown colour, and that's a good indication visually before inspecting the cob that the maize is approaching the ripe stage. Similarly, when we take a look at the cob itself and have a look at a transection of it, you can see that the milk line is approaching just the 3/4 way up the kernel. So similarly, that's quite difficult to indent my thumb in on, and as you can see, there's no moisture there. And just finally, just to taste the kernel again, even to bite, that's quite hard, and you can taste the starch inside. It's quite dry, so again, that's approaching the ripe stage.
For more information on any topics covered in this week's Glanbia Ireland Dairy Focus Vodcast, contact your local Glanbia Ireland representative or log on to glanbiaconnect.com.